Hello, my name is Dr. Crystal Tribbett, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Charla Batey for, in our own words, the UCI Black Alumni Oral History Project. Today is February 8th, 2023. Hello, Charla, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'd like you to start off by telling me your name and your affiliation with UC Irvine.
My name is Charla Jeannine Batey, and I graduated in 2007 from the School of Humanities with a degree in literary journalism from UCI. And I currently am sitting on the UCI Black Alumni Chapter Board of Directors as the Communications Director.
Wonderful. I want to start actually with learning a little bit about your background pre-UCI. So if you can you tell me a little bit about where you're from and what life was like for you growing up?
I was born in Denver, Colorado. I am the oldest of two from that union between my parents, Jean and Charles Batey. And I grew up in a suburban area, have very close to my grandparents, like a house away from my maternal grandparents, which I always am so thankful for. And I believe my parents are too. Went to school in Denver, to public and private school up until I was about 15. And then moved to Southern California. My parents worked at UCLA. So we moved to Stevenson Ranch, California when I was in high school. Went to high school at Academy of the Canyons, had a great time. It was a big relief because I did not like traditional high school when I was in 9th and 10th grade. So Academy of the Canyons was 11th and 12th grade. So when I got there, I was super happy because we got to take college classes at the same time. Ended up being student body president my senior year, and was fortunate to just have a great experience there, which helped me transfer to UCI as a junior. And then that's pretty much my background. But before, and in addition to school, I played some sports, but not super well. I played softball, lacrosse, and basketball and volleyball as a kid, and like to travel with my parents a lot and loved being outside in nature and art.
Um, that's quite that was quite a unique background for high school that you had. I can you tell me a bit about what your vision was for life after high school and college?
To be honest, my initial vision was I wanted to go to FITM, which is like a fashion and design merchandising school. And my parents, who are both educated through higher ed, were like, no, we're not going to support that financially. So what else do you want to do? And so I loved writing. I loved observing people and learning about people. So I found out UCI had a literary journalism program. So, and my best friend from high school also went to UCI as a freshman. So it was helpful because I very much like to have friends where I go, or at least want a connection. So that spurred me into going to UCI.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your decision to choose to attend UCI?
Yeah, I mean, for me, at the time, my family lived in Stevenson Ranch, California, which is about 90 miles from UCI, or 90 minutes. So I wanted to be far enough away that I had some freedom, but then also close enough for, to see them and in case of emergencies. Loved the campus. It's beautiful. Liked the weather because I was already in Southern California. Had the best friend that already went there. And then it had the right major. So those are the main deciding factors for me.
You mentioned that your friend helped to influence your decision to attend UC Irvine. What did your friend tell you about the university?
My friend was named Tova Hack, and we were friends in high school. She told me that it was fun, that she liked the people. Tova is Jewish American, and our families used to travel together, and it was important to both our families. We really appreciated diversity. So Tova told me that it was diverse, and she felt like it was inclusive, which was important to me too. And yeah, at the time, I believe that's what she told me.
What were your parents' perspectives about UCI?
My parents were thrilled because they at least one of them was still at UCLA at that time. So they were all about the UCs. They purposely moved us to California when my brother and I were around, high school age so that we could get in-state tuition. So they were 100% on board. And it was like, they had the same things. They knew I wanted to fly away from the coop a little far from the coop, further than UCLA, flew further than Cal State Long Beach or Cal State Northridge. I also considered those places. And so when I landed on UCI, they were like, great.
Had you visited the campus prior to enrolling?
Yes. So I visited with my family. I visited Tova on multiple occasions. I moved to Irvine and attended Irvine Valley College to finish up my transfer credits before I transferred to UCI. And I did that strategically. And then I got a job on campus at UCI, also strategically, to help my application. So I lived across from campus even before I went to school at UCI.
I need to know a little bit more about this job you had on campus.
This job was one of those jobs. It's like, okay, this is the kind of job you do, and it endears you to like, okay, I'm going to work really hard and be really kind to people who work in the service industry, because I worked, and so did Tova, my friend, my best friend at the time, at the dining hall. And I think we worked at Pippin's. I think it's called, yeah. And I mean, we were doing dishes, like hardcore steaming and cleaning of dishes in the background, scraping food off of pots and pans, reloading all the various serving areas for students. And this is, it's Pippin's Commons, or I believe that's what it's called, is for basically freshmen that live on campus. So it's always busy. You have to be humble enough to see your peers and your friends and be in uniform and serving them. But it also is a good way to like meet people and see people. And then, it's a good way to eat when you're in college. So I worked in Pippin's, and then I eventually transferred to Mesa Court Dining Hall. And then that was my job when I was at IVC trying to transfer to UCI.
What year did you begin working on campus?
I think I started working on campus about 2004.
And you worked for how many years before you enrolled?
I'd say at least 8 months to a year. Yeah. I believe I transferred fall 2005. So I graduated high school in 2003 in June, stayed in Santa Clarita area for a little bit, moved by the time Tova was ready to move off campus, moved in with her and her friends that I met. Let me back up. When Tova was here as a freshman, I used to come visit her a lot as a freshman. So I knew all the freshmen and all the people in her dorm. So everyone knew I wanted to move, and we all liked each other. So when they were able to move off campus, I became a roommate of 3 other girls, Tova, Christina, and Nicole. And we moved off campus their sophomore year. So that was 2004, fall 2004. And I worked in the dining halls from fall 2004 through at least, I would say, June of 2005. Maybe longer.
What were your first impressions of UCI when you arrived?
I thought it was aesthetically, I thought it was beautiful and interesting. I grew up, one of my best friends when I was in Denver in middle school, her family, both her parents were architects. So I loved architecture. It's just not a skill set I have, or I just didn't feel, I couldn't, I would have loved to do it, but I just don't think I had the skill set to be an architect. But I appreciate architecture, and that's one of the most obvious things about UCI, I think, is the architecture. And then for me, because I love nature and I grew up in Colorado and I grew up in places where we ventured out to nature a lot, I was appreciative of the open space and the trees. And yeah, I mean, aesthetically, everything looked wonderful. And I recall that I didn't feel like I stood out too much, as a Black American. I felt like there was diversity. It wasn't hugely diverse in terms of Black students, but it was better than some spaces I had been in prior in my life.
So much of your experience at a college or university campus is about who you're friends with and where you live. And you mentioned that you lived off campus. Did you live off campus for your entire time as a student at UCI?
So I lived in Cornell Court, which was across campus, which was off campus my first year there. Then I believe we moved to Vista del Campo, like the OG Vista del Campo. Not like, I know now there's like a lot of Vista del Campos, but it was like the original one, which was super cool to be the first residence there. And then I think after Vista del Campo ended, I moved to Park West, which is in Irvine. And I believe Park West was where I lived when I graduated, which is off campus, off Mickelson.
What was it like to live on campus in Vista del Campo? Could you tell me a little bit about that? Because if I caught you right, you said you were one of the first student groups to live in that residential hall.
Yeah, I think we were. I think that we were the first. It was amazing. It was brand new. It was super posh. Affordability wise, I'm so grateful all the time that my parents supported me financially through college, but the rent was a lot lower and I got my own room because when I was in Cornell Court, Tova and I shared a room and Christine and Nicole shared a room. And then we all shared one full bathroom and one like powder room. So in Vista del Campo, it was like you have 2 rooms on each side, individual rooms, and then each of those 2 rooms shares a full bathroom. So that was amazing. It had a pool, a fitness center. There was a bus to campus. It was fun because, everyone was your age living in this apartment complex, essentially. And there was ample parking, which was also important. I had a car the whole time I was at UCI because, like I said, my parents lived, up in Santa Clarita, and just in general, I needed a car. So parking was always important. At Cornell Court, parking was limited. And then if you didn't get home in time, it was hard to find street parking. So these were all things that were perks when I got to Vista del Campo.
What were your fellow classmates, students like who lived at Vista del Campo and in general beyond Vista del Campo?
I just recall everyone, being, for the most part, getting along. We were all similar ages, going through similar experiences. A lot of what happened at Vista del Campo, I feel like, was synergy from people who lived in the dorms when they were freshmen, whether it was in Mesa, I think it's called Mesa Court, or I never lived there, but and the other dorm area, Middle Earth. People who lived there as freshmen all of a sudden came back to Vista del Campo, and I think we were seniors or juniors, and it was like you're reunited in this on-campus space again because it was new and there wasn't a lot of on-campus housing for upperclassmen at that time. So that was fun. And students also worked there. So that was cool. But yeah, I have really fond memories of there. Lots of parties. But also, lots of support in terms of, just anything. Dinner, sharing books, studying, crying over whatever crisis we were having at the time. Yeah.
How would you describe the general student population at UCI during the years you attended?
I always felt comfortable and happy with the student population, at least in my friends were mainly in the School of Humanities, the School of Social Sciences, and engineering. So I can't speak to all the schools, but from those schools, the cohort that I was kind of in, or the group, we looked out for each other, and we lived close to each other. People dated between those groups. Some people got married from those groups. I was kind of like, I was into the new university. I wrote for the new university at the time. So I had a kind of a subgroup there, but I just liked that my friends all had different kind of majors and backgrounds. And I think I've mentioned this a few times, like diversity and inclusion are really important to me. And my friends were from every background there is. And I loved that about UCI.
What can you tell me about the Black community at UCI during the time that you were a student?
So I had a couple Black friends, and it's one of those things I look back and I think did I not, were there not more Black kids at the time? I say kids, but we were young adults. Were there not more Black students at the time, or was it just the circle I was in? But I do remember like BSU was there. I do remember going to events in the Cross Cultural Center and there being things. I also remember that my mom was like adamant that she wanted me to pledge Alpha Kappa Alpha. And I think there's like a small chapter there. And I kept on, trying to stray away from that because I didn't want to be in a sorority, any sorority. It wasn't about it being a Black sorority. I just didn't want to be in a sorority. But I remember presence, but I don't feel like I was fully engrossed in it as a student in those organizations.
Did you attend some Black Student Union events?
I think I mainly attended stuff at the Cross Cultural Center. Yeah, and I might have gone to one BSU meeting or a couple. And I think that that's one of the things when you transfer in as a transfer student too. A lot of that stuff, like learning about those organizations and meeting people, happens freshman year. It happens during welcome week. It happens during that first quarter. So I did have the disadvantage of not having that. I transferred in as a junior and as a younger junior. So I tried to find my way into different things I was in, but I was really focused on journalism and working. And so that's just where my path took me. But I do think if I had transferred in as a freshman, I might have been more involved with Black organizations on campus.
What kind of things were happening at the Cross Cultural Center?
I just recall there was a lot of like events that had to do with cross-culturalism, had to do with, I believe Dr. White was alive when I was there. I vaguely recall like that man was such a presence. Like, so I vaguely recall going to an event where he was there and just being in awe of like his presence. I recall just like it was a great place to feel safe and feel like everyone wanted to learn. Yeah, and I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry, I don't remember specific like event, I guess, topics, but it was just always, it felt like your grandparents' like living room. Like, you could go in there, be comfortable, hang out, listen to programming, just listen to people, overhear people's conversations, get a glimpse of like, these professors, including Dr. White, who were so out of this world. That's what I recall.
You might have alluded to this already, but I want to ask you explicitly, who were some of the most influential people in your life at UC Irvine?
So Amy Wilentz, who's a professor of journalism, I think she's still a professor there. And Amy DePaul, the Amy's of Lit J, were very influential when I was there. They were so encouraging of my writing and my reporting and supportive of me. And then in my post undergraduate career, they both are still involved in the school or teach there, and I've gone back to their classes and talked to their classes, which has been really cool. I don't remember specific names of people, but I've studied abroad at Cambridge, and the people in the education abroad office and just that program were also wonderful. When I was there, Chancellor Drake was the chancellor, and that was cool. So that was in and of itself, like having a Black male chancellor on campus, and just him being that he was kind, he was humble but confident. It definitely was something to look up to and something that made you feel like, okay, I belong here. Okay, I can see where like my future career could go. Here's this man who's achieved something, and his wife, who's also lovely whenever I encountered her. So they come to mind. Barry Siegel, who started the Lit J program, was also like a Joe White. It's like, oh, you get into one of Barry's classes or Professor Siegel's classes, or you just see him passing in the hall or in the quad areas. That was amazing. Those are the names that come to mind.
I haven't asked you directly about literary journalism, but I have to, because you mentioned that's your major, or was your major, right? Yeah. And so I would like to learn about, your path to literary journalism. It's not necessarily something that's like listed in high school as something you're going to do. So can you tell me about how you chose or became involved in literary journalism, and then how that, what that being in that department was like?
So I loved, I knew I didn't want to be on air like reporter. I knew I loved writing and reading. I still do. And I knew that my parents wanted me and required me to essentially go to a UC or a college. I knew, and I also wanted to go to college. I shouldn't say they required me. I knew I wanted to get a degree. So, but I wanted something creative. I didn't want, I'm not, I'm like, I'm kind of a creative brain. So I remember looking and like finding it, stumbling on it, because we'd have to check the dates, but I'm pretty sure the Lit J program at UCI also started around the time that I got to UCI. So being in that, like, again, something happens where you're in that initial kind of like startup stage where it's so exciting, and people are learning, the professors are learning, everyone's figuring it out. And I'm okay with that. It's like, and then it also creates opportunities, like, it's like, and different pathways. So I never felt limited by that major. I got to go on assignment, so to speak, in the community and do things. I got to write for the New U. My dream, and maybe will still happen, was to be an editor or a writer for a magazine. And literary journalism is all about kind of long form creative journalism style. So not necessarily newspaper, but more like long form. It's not the best topic, but one of the books that I still love and I read in that program is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. And so like that's an example of literary journalistic, not a book, for example. So I should also back up and say nonfiction is also, I like nonfiction to read it and to write it. So yeah, the cards fell as they may.
Yeah. Can I ask you what might have been one of your favorite assignments?
So I was, interestingly enough, even though I was into journalism and talking to people, I also, and I still think I am very much an introvert. I can be very shy. So one of my favorite assignments was like, I really liked like fly on the wall kind of reporting. So like a friend of mine worked at a veterinary hospital, and I wanted to kind of get the behind the scenes scoop on like what it's like at a veterinary hospital, because, I love animals, and animals are such an important part of people's lives. And, you don't always see what happens when you're, after you drop off, your dog or your cat or any kind of animal there. And so I got access to go behind the scenes there. Saw all kinds of stuff, some of it not great. But that was a fun assignment. Try to think of another assignment. Not necessarily for Lit J program, but in general, like I wrote about sports at UCI, and like I don't play tennis and I don't know much about tennis, but I wrote about tennis. I spotlighted different people on campus who were playing sports. And then I think it was one of these, like, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I think senior year, I started writing about different pathways, like, okay, what happens to the engineering student after they graduate, or the college couple, or the person who's an international student. So I wrote profile pieces, and I do still like writing profile pieces on people or companies.
Were these profile pieces ones that you wrote for your classes or for the New U?
So that one, and off the record, but on the record, I guess. I think I wrote it. I think it partly satisfied something for class, but then I also published it in the New U. And then at the time, I also worked for, I forget about it, Jaded Magazine, which was like a AAPI magazine, and I kind of did like community outreach stuff and went to events under their cover too, and wrote about events on campus. But yeah, the profiles were primarily for, I believe, the New U, but I think I used them for a class too, and I think that was okay.
If not, it's too late. You already graduated.
It's too late. I already have my degree. Sorry, guys.
So far, I'm clear that you've worked on campus in dining. You worked for the New U and for Jaded. Were there other organizations or activities that you participated in at UCI that we haven't talked about yet?
I was a nanny for a family that lived in Shady Canyon for a good amount of time in UCI. And also after I graduated, they were a lovely family. They had 3 boys. I started when their youngest was born. It was a super convenient job because Shady Canyon, I think I lived at Vista Del Campo. It was like right up the hill from Vista Del Campo. They paid cash, also a benefit. And it did take me out of the space of the college. It took me into a space of like, oh, this is a suburban family who lives in Orange County, and this is what that's like. And I was fortunate to travel with them some places, so that was also wonderful.
How did your activities and affiliations shape not only your experience as a UCI student, but post UCI career and worldview?
So the Amy's that I referenced, the professors, they were really key in helping me prepare an application and get into UC Berkeley School of Journalism after graduating from UCI. It's like all it was like dead set on going to Berkeley. Went to Berkeley maybe for 4 months, and then left. My dog is gonna talk. Went to Berkeley for maybe 4 months and then left. And thought that that's what I wanted to do, was go to grad school at Berkeley and become get another degree in journalism. And then, somehow life and things change, and my heart took me back to Orange County and Irvine. And lo and behold, now I think this is my 20th year living here. Like, I still live in Irvine. My kids go to school in Irvine. I've worked at UCI. I live about 15 minutes from UCI. I would have never thought that would have been the case when I was undergrad there. Not that I didn't like the area, but you always think you're going to launch and go somewhere. I thought I was going to launch also and go to Europe at some point and live and work in Europe. So I think the thing that I'm getting at is I grew up mainly at Irvine. So I think it's still home to me in a lot of ways. And I don't know how long it will be. I hope longer. I very much want my kids to go through the Irvine Unified School District system. But I think it was shaped by feeling comfortable. For me, it's always been about, because I grew up with a lot of social anxiety, feeling comfortable and at home and seen and understood have been important. And for the most part, I've felt that in Irvine.
What's your fondest memory of your time as a student at UC Irvine?
I think studying abroad in Cambridge. It was a summer. It felt like it was like the best, longest summer ever. But just because some kids came from UCI, but kids came from all the UCs. So again, the network of growing your network was important. Traveling in different European countries, seeing that culture. Yeah, that's probably one of my best memories.
What did you study while you were abroad?
I fulfilled some of the general education things. So like I took I think history and English classes, but they all supported my undergraduate degree.
And when was your time abroad? Which years and for how long were you away?
I was away the summer of 2006, I think for about 3 months. Mm-hmm. One moment, because I'm going to lock my dog out if that's okay.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. First is I'm going to be about your return. Like, it sounds like you haven't left in a while, but I mean, kind of like a return to UCI. You mentioned that you worked here.
I did.
For a point of time. And so could you share with us what role you had on campus as an employee of the university post-graduation, and what that experience was like for you? I mean, I want to know why come back to the university too?
So I graduated from UCI in 2007. I worked at different places throughout Orange County. Like I said, I went to Berkeley before I worked in Orange County. I went to Berkeley for a little bit. I also did a stint at USC because I thought I just needed to come back to SoCal and do journalism school, but eventually landed back in Orange County. And the recession was going on at that time, and like I said, I was very fortunate to have my parents supporting me, but also I very aware of like I needed to make a decent income to live the lifestyle I was used to. So I had I had a full-time job. I probably had then a side job and maybe another side job, and everything was kind of in PR and marketing. Sometimes I would write things for publications, but print journalism is a hard career to make a steady salary in. Unfortunately, the industry is taking a lot of cuts. So I was working in like a PR and social media agency. I knew my parents, had worked in the UC system. I knew that there were benefits to working in the UC system, like retirement and just some stability. So somehow I stumbled upon a job at UCI Libraries, which was like the communications and events officer. I started working at UCI Library. I got that job. I remember the day I got called for that I got that job, and I was in shock. One, I felt young. I felt like this was a huge job because I was the first person to do that role. And I couldn't believe what was happening. At the time, the salary was like a bit life-changing. So I took that role in 2013 and worked there, I think, through about November 2017. And it was a great experience. Learned a lot. I hope I did well and shaped some of the things that are happening at UCI Library still. And then, of course, it helped to know the camp. It helped to know things about the campus. And I learned so much more about the campus working there, because by nature of the libraries, it's libraries. And then also the archives are within the libraries, which we had many events about UCI's history, and with many experts coming in from all over the campus and the community. So not just talking about UCI's history, but the region. So that's kind of the role I took at UCI. And I never say never. I might end up back at UCI, but eventually I felt like I needed to move on to a different role. And so I left UCI, working at UCI in 2017.
Because I know a little inside bit about this, I'm also going to say, was it 2013 or 2014 that you started working?
Oh, you probably know better. It was probably 2014, maybe then. I am not the best at remembering specific dates.
It's okay. Do you have a fond memory of working for UCI?
I think this goes back, and I see a theme now. Like I like the kind of startup life and the startup culture. So that department I was starting things up and creating things, and it was stressful at times, like really stressful, but it was also very rewarding to see things come to fruition. We did a lot of great events. I remember some of my favorite events were events like we did an event with Ken Burns, who's a documentary filmmaker, and that was incredible. Working with UCI Illuminations, and Professor Julia Lupton gave us, the libraries and myself, a lot of opportunities to work with some big name authors. One that comes to mind is Angie Thomas, who writes young adult content, and she's about my age, so that was pretty cool to see her and to work on that event. I just felt like I had a lot of access things. Also, I helped with the 50th anniversary. I was on that committee. Another one of those opportunities is where it's like, I feel like an imposter syndrome, because I felt like I was new at the university, and then the 50th anniversary hit, and here, you're going to be on this committee led by Dr. Parham and all these big wigs at UCI. And, but, in retrospect, it was a great experience.
I can ask this of you because you've worked here, but what's it like to be a Black employee of UCI?
I feel like as a Black employee, I learned more, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but I learned more about the Black student experience. Like I heard from more Black students, or I could see more clearly some of the issues they might have been having or feeling isolated. As a Black employee, I also felt like there was also a network within a network, and there was BFSA, Black Faculty Staff Association, and there was great things happening in that group. Dr. Thomas Parham was Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs when I worked there, and I think he was one of the highest ranking Black people on campus. Again, just like when Dr. Drake was there, it's like that was very comforting and very, you felt like, hey, this is a good place to be and that I can make a difference here and people are making a difference here. So my experience as a Black staff member was good for the most part.
You've had shared so many wonderful things about your time and experiences at UCI. I'd like you to take a moment to reflect on any challenges that you might have faced and had to overcome while you were here, either as a student or as an employee.
I would say as a student, it was hard in terms of like dating. And that could be on me and my own preferences, but I didn't really ever fully date when I was in college. And, I think that's okay, but I saw a lot of my peers did, and my friends did. I also did have a very unfortunate experience once with an employer, and it was kind of like us saying some inappropriate things to me, not about race, but more as a woman. But that was handled, and this goes back to my parents lived close, and so they drove down quickly and helped me handle that situation. Those are the things that stood out as a student, just feeling a little bit like, okay, romantically and dating wise, which is a big part of college, I feel like, was those opportunities weren't there for me. As an employee, I was one of the only Black people, I would say, in that level of role in strategic communications at the time. So yeah, I've worked really hard, and I felt like I always wanted to prove myself. I put pressure on myself for that, but I'm sure there's some underlying pressure that was there, or more visibility to me in that role. And I was younger for that role as well. Also just learning to work in a big organization and function in an organization that has its its personalities and bureaucracies and whatnot and histories, and then working with faculty as a staff member. There's some lessons there and some things you have to be aware of. So yeah, it was just nonstop, I would say, learning and pivoting in it. And it went by fast in retrospect, like a lot, but the time, sometimes days seemed long. We were busy.
You mentioned there were some lessons learned working with, faculty and administration and such. Do you recall any in particular?
I think that, I think that some faculty, it just depends. The libraries is so uniquely positioned in that you work with faculty from all different areas in all different schools, and there's different expectations, I feel like, for faculty on how they're going to be treated or how they are going to be presented or how their materials or research are going to be presented, and you have to be aware of that. And then you have to be aware of the differences also with like the topics they are doing, or if they're faculty from different countries. And it's all good, but it teaches you a lot about working cross-culturally and cross disciplines, and sometimes not even to be honest, sometimes not even understanding like the work that they're talking about or presenting. And then you have to explain, for my role and my team's role, explain it and present it either through communications or events to more of a lay audience, but also not disrespect them. So I felt a lot of responsibility to do that.
You mentioned a little bit about some challenges you had with an employer on campus, and I'm going to ask a little bit if you would be willing to share some details. Sure. Of course, it's up to you how much.
Yeah. I am willing to share it. It was not, and I will say this, it was a contractor, not a UC system employee or supervisor. But I think I had the benefit of, he said something inappropriate to me once when I was working at the dining halls, and I had the benefit of knowing that it was inappropriate. be that I had like these friends and stuff that I touched base with who also worked there or came there who were like, oh yeah, he's a bit inappropriate. And then C, my mom is an HR executive. So she was like, yeah, that's definitely inappropriate. And she could probably name a bunch of codes and titles and what reasons why. So it was handled pretty well by the organization, which wasn't the UC system. I kept my job. I just transferred locations. I can't remember. I think he kept his job too for a while, at least. But it was very much an awakening of like, okay, like, you're an adult and these things can happen in the workplace. And it was scary, but like, I had to stand up for myself.
So this was before you were a student or during?
Yeah. So this was, I think this was before I officially was accepted into UCI, but I worked on campus.
Mhm.
And the company was a company that was outsourced by the campus or maybe University of California as a whole to do dining services or food services. I won't name the company.
Sure. During the process of addressing your concerns, were there ways in which the university showed its support of your efforts, or what role did the university play in helping to resolve your issue with the contract employee?
I can't recall the university getting involved too much per se, and I could be wrong because it was a third-party contractor, but I don't think they didn't. I never felt like anyone who was in power at that time or at a position of authority was not supportive of me. So if somebody was involved in the university, because it was a little bit traumatic at the time too. So if someone was involved for the university, I don't recall it being them not being supportive.
Mm. We've covered so much in terms of your experience as a UCI transfer student and as a UCI employee. Is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you were hoping to talk about?
I would like to talk about a little bit about the Black Alumni chapter. So I am one of the newer board members, and when I say newer, I think I've been on this board now for, I don't know, since I left UCI. So you're better with dates. So I left UCI working in 2017. I think I've joined this board in 2018, and it's 2023 now. There are people on this board who have been dedicating themselves to this work for like decades. And I feel like our chapter has grown so much. And that's in part because of these people, in part because of having leaders who were at UC at the time, Dr. Parham, for example, who supported the chapter. Dr. Haynes, Douglas Haynes was there, who was a vice chancellor at the time, supporting the chapter. And, unfortunately, some crazy stuff happened in society that also brought the chapter more to relevance, I think, with the school. And so I just want to say that I think that it's important that the chapter continues to be respected, supported by the University of California Irvine Alumni Association, and that future generations see this as an opportunity to like, hey, even if you didn't have the best time at UCI, take what you might not have had was a great time and then put that into being an alumni leader who then helps the next generation of people have a better time. And I really just like hate when people complain about stuff and then don't go and try to help, solve it. So for me, it's been good to, hear what current students are going through. Also hear from generations that went to school before me who are members of the chapter, and share resources and stay connected to the university.
The Black Alumni chapter is a fairly new chapter, I believe.
Yeah, officially, I think.
Yeah, so can you refresh my memory? When was the chapter formally recognized?
I think the chapter was formally recognized around when I became on the board, which was around 2018, but the chapter, or at least activities of the group were happening way before then, but I think they officially became a chapter under the umbrella of UCI Alumni Association around 2018, maybe a little earlier. I might have still been on staff when they became a chapter. These years are very blurry for me. I'm sorry.
Do you know the names of some of the founding members of the chapter?
I believe who she's still on the board. She's Executive Vice President Lolita Brown Fletcher. I think John Elston, who's also on the board, was one of the founding members. Tanya Burns, Deborah Wright Henley. I hope I'm getting the names correct. I believe they were all some of the founding members, but we'd have to check that. And I hope they are all going to do oral histories or already have.
And from your understanding as part of a member of the board, what is the charge for the chapter? What is its ultimate goal and vision?
I think we have a few, but I think one of them is we all had varying experiences at UCI. And so I think that one of our core things is to know what's going on with students, especially Black students and all students at UCI, and see where we can help support them both while they're at the university and once they graduate. So that's a goal. We do not mind going to UCI administration and asking tough questions about support of students. We also, we do student scholarships through fundraising and through our efforts. We put out communications to our members about things that we've done either with students or in the community or that are happening at UCI. So I think we're a channel for connecting current students, recent grads, and those of us who have been out of the university for a while. And also, within the community in Orange County's diversified a lot. Our chapter president was just part of the Irvine delegation of the Orange County Historical Society, I believe, Black History Month parade. And I think it's the 43rd annual parade. I did not know there was a parade until this year. That's a problem, but there's a parade. And Jesse C. Moore Jr., who's the current president of UCI Black Alumni Association, was part of the Irvine delegation, which include Mayor Khan and I believe the current, the current dean of the business school, Ian Williamson, and some other key people from UCI. That's a big deal, in my opinion, to have the delegation be represented by key folks affiliated with the university, including an alumni chapter. And I hope we're represented more throughout the county, because I've lived here, since I was probably 19 and I'm 38. And I've seen the growth of the Black community here. So I'm glad that we are getting a seat at the table for a lot of things, so to speak.
Yeah, thanks for that reflection. The parade is put on by the Orange County Heritage Council.
Oh, thank you.
And it was indeed their 40th year, I believe. I think it was their 40th year, not their 41st this year.
Well, I also want to say that for the record that the Black Alumni chapter was also fortunate to be at the first Irvine Juneteenth event. And so was the libraries and the archives and you, Dr. Tribbett. So, these are things that they're going to hopefully make a lasting impact and continue in the community.
I could talk to you forever. Because you're unique to have grown up here and to go to school at UCI and now to be living here in Irvine. And so I'll only trouble you for a little bit longer, but in your reflections about the diversification of the county, you mentioned how much, at least during your times of living here, you've seen a change. And I wonder if there's anything else you'd like to speak to in terms of just your observations being in Orange County and specifically an Irvine resident.
Yeah, I mean, I think the diversification is amazing. I think it has to do with a lot of the, I mean, sure does, businesses coming to Orange County and specifically Irvine, either operating, like a West Coast headquarters here or their headquarters. Now that I work in a tech and telecom company, I see how much of that industry is here. I see how strong like the chamber is and the city is with economic and business development. And with that, like, you're going to attract, and we do, diversity from not just the Black community, but from all communities. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a model, I hope, for more cities, because to me, now that I'm a parent of young children, like this area represents the world that we actually are. And I really, really, really hope that we continue to embrace it and support it. And I feel very fortunate to be a part of it. It's not been easy. Financially, it is not easy to live in Irvine. And I recognize that. But I also recognize that there's more opportunities for people to live in Irvine and the Orange County region. And I think that's exciting. I think that I think a lot of times when I went to school in Santa Clarita, which is a suburb of LA County, it was like, oh, people thought LA, they're like, what's in the middle? And then they think San Diego. And now it's like people are like, oh, Orange County's in the middle, and specifically Irvine's there. Like, it's, when you look at a map now, it's like, okay, you can identify where about Irvine is. So that's a big deal within the last, 60, 70 years. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
What are your thoughts on how Black students, faculty, and staff can thrive at UC Irvine?
I think just, when you work at UCI or you go to school there, it becomes a bubble. Even when you work in Irvine, it becomes a bubble, or live in Irvine. But there's so many parts of Orange County, and there's so many people throughout the region. So I think just remembering, like, yes, even like we have to reach out past Irvine. Irvine's great, but so are surrounding areas. And some of those surrounding areas have more diversity than Irvine by nature of socioeconomics. So keeping that in mind, I think also just keeping the big picture of, like, a lot of changes happen in the last, 50, 60 years. So, we're being part of the current change, and sometimes things are discouraging, and sometimes things are hard, and racism does happen and exist to all of us. But I think we're strong as a people, and we're growing in numbers in this area and influence. So I think just, stay the course. What do I say? Stay the course. Know also the power of community and the power of the fact that we are a society that lives in a digital age with the internet and has resources to communicate outwardly about what's going on in our smaller bubbles. And my grandparents' grandparents did not have that. And that in and of itself is a privilege and an asset.
Thank you for those words and thoughts. Can you describe your UCI experience in 3 words?
Not zot. That's 4. Zot. About hard and humbling, I would say. I'm saying that as like my whole experience. So from being a student to being a staff member to being in this role of leadership on the board for the Black Alumni Association. Some hard times. And that's not just reflective of the campus or the system. It's just, hard times in the world. But also humbling in that, we get to see the differences being made. And I've learned a lot about myself, and so hard and humbling.
Charla, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this project. I really appreciate hearing your stories, so thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this.